So welcome back to Educational Warfare. I'm Dr. Jordan Lauer, alongside with my special guest, teacher, father, lover of government and history, Mr. Blake Bellamy. What's up, Blake?
So, man, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's awesome that you're on the show. Really appreciate it. Thank you for being here. It's really cool that to get to have you able to talk about this today. Um, a couple program reminders before we get going, before we jump in the topic. Follow us on all the socials. We're at ED Warfare on X and Blue Sky. We are on Blue Sky. We're at Dr. Jordan Lauer at bluesky.social. And also remember, you can find full video episodes of our show on our YouTube channel, Educational Warfare. Also, kind of exciting time. Just the other day, my website, jordanlauer.com, went live. So we've talked about it a few times. Blake obviously knows about it. Have a My book is coming out, The Two Backpacks, Understanding Teens and What They Carry. So the website, if you're curious about it, if you're like, I'm watching the show already, what's on the website? So you can get you can get audio episodes there. You can get shorts of this show. You can also find information on the two backpacks. It comes out June 10th. We have official day. So June 10th is officially when it's live and will be on Amazon. And you can go there and you kind of see the info. And I'll be updating soon if we'll be able to, the pre-order situation here the next day or two. So be watching out for a little announcement on that. But you can go there. And I also am writing, I also have a blog that'll be parts of the book. It'll be some stuff from the show on the education side. And there's another part of the blog where it's just kind of my little world, anything that pops in my head. Last episode on educational warfare, I know Blake, you peeped at it for a little bit. We talked about Andor. TV show. Just wanted to kind of dive into something and I connected it to history and how totalitarian regimes do the things they showed because the showrunner of that show actually is a scholar on rebellions. So he wasn't just making a Star Wars show. He actually had like depth to it. So I also wrote a blog kind of similar to that about comfort and everything and how totalitarian regimes use that. So jordanlauer.com, go there. You can subscribe to the blog. You can get on the email list. You can check out stuff in the book. It's really exciting. So appreciate all your views. And thank you so much. And it'll be like the link will be right there. So go ahead and hit that. Don't forget to like and subscribe the channel. Like when you like and subscribe it lets you get any updates about new information, puts us out there. And please remember, if you enjoy what you're seeing, share it with somebody. It might be a teacher who wants to hear it, might be a parent, might be a friend. You might just be like, dude, these two guys were pretty funny. Check them out. Tell somebody, point them to the channel because that's how we really grow this thing. We really rely on you. And we thank you all so much for being here. So today's topic is kind of it's a heavy one, but I don't want to like scare people away right away. We're not talking about we're not going to talk about the time our first childhood dog passed away. Sadness. It's that type of heavy, but it is one that's kind of, a lot of people have feelings over this topic, but they may not have a true understanding. And that's what we're trying to do today. So, today we're talking about basically the cuts, right? Trump's education budget and what that could mean for teachers. Like if you're a teacher, this kind of explain some changes you might see in this, kind of get that in line so you can create your own thoughts and feelings on it. If you're a parent, what could be happening to your school, to the school your child goes into, what programs could be there, what changes could be seen. If you're a student, same thing, what you could expect. So this hopefully covers all that and brings a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of insight. That way, when people talk about it, you really can you're coming from a place of knowledge. So, Blake, just what are your initial thoughts on that?
So, I mean, there's going to be, less money. And that's always going to matter a lot, especially when it comes to grants. How are these states going to get their money? Is it going to affect, the underprivileged students, especially with special needs? That's kind of my big take. I don't want to see special education go away, especially students that are low income, living in poverty-stricken areas, whether it's rural or urban areas. That was kind of the first things I looked for. Um, And when you talk about cuts to education, it's scary, especially when a lot of parents' chief complaints is my child getting a good education? The United States, it's been lagging a bit. I still think, we are the lone superpower in the world, and we do have good education. I think in all 50 states, every student does have the ability to get a good education. Now, with these cuts, does it make that harder? And that's
Right.
kind of what I am concerned about, and that's why. We're going to be diving pretty deep into this today. I'm no policy expert, neither are you. However, we are giving our initial thoughts. We are educators. I
Right.
teach AP United States government. I teach honors United States history. My background is in political science, pre-law. I worked for the federal government before, political campaigns. So I saw how the sausage is made with a lot of that. And education's always, it's a kitchen table discussion. People discuss that constantly. That
Right.
every candidate, whether you're state, local, federal, they all talk about education in their campaign platform. So it's important to understand this, and hopefully by the time people get done listening to this or watching this, they'll be at least a little bit more informed on the big beautiful bill. Is it big? Probably. Is it beautiful? We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah,
See.
absolutely. And I mean, you heard Blake there that he has a good background in this, like has really seen that. I have a political science background as well, worked on a couple campaigns. So when I was at college, so we kind of do know a little bit about how these things are put together, some of the intentions, what they're kind of thinking. But I mean, that was a great time. It's all the time we have for you, Blake, because our budget has been cut. So good to see you. Thanks for coming in. That's kind of how I
Thank you.
feel
Yeah,
though,
thank
right?
you for
Right. Yeah. That's kind of how I feel though. It's like, hey, let's cut education's budget. Like the thing we keep talking about, how it's not doing well enough. And that's where we're getting into. Like, is it something you want to end premature or even like snip a little? And that's where people have a lot of different feelings about this, is that it's not as simple as, it's not like cutting an industry. And we'll talk about this. Like when a lot of people say, and I'm one of the people that kind of like agree with it, like, hey, could we maybe not cut it, but cut as much here and maybe look at the defense budget? Because that can be categorized in maybe making less planes, maybe making less whatever is in the military. You can kind of categorize that by something being made. Where education, it's really tough to do that because everything we're doing is a service. So when you cut something, it's basically saying this group, this person, this group of students may not be getting this. Now, the viability or the effectiveness of some of those things, obviously up for debate. Things should be looked at. I don't think anybody, I think that's a big problem that we're kind of getting into. The two sides kind of go into of like, you get kind of pushed in these sides of either you want cuts or you don't want cuts. And I think a lot of people were, and that the loudest groups obviously make those points, but I think a lot of people simply just want to be like, let's have transparency on what we're looking at, right? Because I don't feel that it's not like I'm sitting here saying like nothing in education should be cut. I don't think that's fair to say. But, you know, we kind of also want to see reasoning behind before it's just cut.
Yeah, I don't want to see a chainsaw to everything. I kind of agree exactly. I want transparency. I'm somebody that's, I usually come from the very libertarian side of it. More government involvement is the worst. But when it does come, and you kind of hit the nail on the hammer a minute ago, whenever you discussed like it's a service. Contrary to popular belief, teachers are not millionaires. We do this because
You're not,
I'm,
man, poor guy.
I'm not.
Yeah, I just got off my yacht.
So we're doing this generally. Again, some teachers have terrible intentions. There's some terrible teachers out there. There's terrible people everywhere.
Right.
Generally speaking, I think you get into teaching. One, you want educated society. That's one of the reasons why I got in there. I joined teaching when I was doing something very different. And I was like, you know what? We need teachers. I'm tired of seeing dumb people in this world. We have very little critical thinking. And my goal as a teacher is to provide skills to make people think more critically. That's why I think social studies matters a ton. And if we cut
Absolutely.
a lot of stuff like
Preach.
that, if we cut, thank you. If we cut these major subjects, cut the resources for like outside activities, I think that really does a disservice to people. And that's why that's kind of one of the first things I also looked for in this bill. Does it impact core subjects? What does it do outside of school? How is it going to harm us? Is there any benefit to this? Cutting funds. Where are we cutting the funds at? Are we cutting necessary things? Are we trimming fat? I mean, that's that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, this is passed through the House of Representatives. The Senate, we'll see. This could look a little different, but I imagine what we're seeing is probably what we'll get at this point.
Uh,
So it is important to kind of see how our senators vote on this. There's a very slim majority in the Senate, so this could be a tiebreaker. JD Vance, he could have his first real tiebreaker in the Senate.
That's a super interesting point. I didn't even think about that, where he could literally be sitting there and, you know, have to make that decision, which is whew, that'd be definitely interesting. So we'll see how that part goes. So let's get it. We've talked about the cuts, so let's kind of that way people know what we're talking about. Let's get into some of the things, what the education cuts are. So basically, there's deep cuts the Department of Education proposed in this. So uh, President Trump is seeking to slash billions to the federal education budget. And basically, it'd be like a proposed elimination of at least, there's 10 major programs, and there's some other things that kind of fall in those categories, things being cut. So some of the things that are being cut, I'll go through them real quick and we can kind of talk about them if there's any that pop out to you. And I'll just kind of briefly explain to do like supportive, effective instruction state grants, which basically helps train teachers in various ways. 21st Century Community Learning Centers, which gives after school summer learning programs for low income students. Title III, which is English language acquisition grants. Teacher quality partnership grants, which those basically support teacher prep and residency. So getting ready and kind of staying and having a teacher come to your school if you need it. Preschool development grants, access to high quality preschool for low income children. Full service community school program, basically, again, connecting communities and schools, kind of giving that bridge for school and community to work together. Rural Education Achievement Program helps small rural schools that lack resources due to isolation. Magnet School Assistance promotes voluntary school desegregation, supports diverse magnet schools. Arts and Education Program supports arts in K through 12. And number 10, funding for adult education programs. So going and getting your GED. So gone, teacher recruitment funds, on life support, English learner programs, adult education, ghosted. It's basically like Marie Kondo came in here and said, "This doesn't spark joy. Get rid of it." And that's kind of like the thing that's so strange to me is like some of these, the one that sticks out to me again is like Rural Education Achievement Program. I feel like that's right at the heart of the president's base. You're going kind of like, hey, you like your small town area, your small school, we're going to kind of the funds to that from the federal government. Arts and education program, that has been a huge fight for years, is making sure arts are in school. All the research, I mean, almost everything you look up. I don't know if there's a single research or studied criterion that's like arts don't help students. Like in almost every emotional regulation, emotional development, social development, standard like learning, being able to be a part of art or music helps your brain develop, which therefore you learn, you buy in. So that's an interesting one as well that they're finally taking that cut. What do you think about some of those?
With that one, the creativity one, like with the arts, name one profession where creativity doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
I
I
mean,
mean,
in our job, we see it all the time. Our both of our subjects are, very historical based. There's the
right.
facts. Here's what happened. Here's trends of what's going on. But the way we deliver that material is creative. I was never. I always tell my students and my friends that I was the world's worst K through 12 student. I was terrible. I did not get better until college years. However, I wish I would have paid more attention because I'm not the most creative human being in the world. That's something I just kind of had to practice as an adult. Get creative with lesson plans because everyone learns different. If you're teaching
Mm,
from a class of 30 people, you need to get creative. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have to deliver the material so all 30 learners can actually learn that. So that's kind of scary. One thing I must have missed that whenever I was prepping the GED program. That is terrible. So
yeah.
that's um, I will say it's not very hard to graduate high school. It's really not. But there's a lot of people that get behind. Things happen. Whether especially when I was in high school, there were so many teenage pregnancies. I'm at a school now. You don't see that at all.
Yeah.
Um, However, when I was in high school, I mean, we had several. It's like, oh, who's pregnant this week?
Yeah.
And a lot of them had to drop out. I knew one girl who had three kids by the time she turned 17,
Whew.
dropped out. She ended up not getting her GED. She should have, but
Yeah.
things like that. For those people, I mean, obviously, kids make mistakes, things happen, people grow up. Being able to fall back on a GED, having these programs, it's incredibly beneficial for all the stakeholders of education. Because the more educated you are, studies have shown less crime, less poverty, things of that nature. And as a society, whether you're left, right, center, everybody wants that. Who doesn't want less poverty, less crime? That's
Yeah.
something we absolutely need. And then to go back with you said with the cuts to the rural schools. So this was kind of a double-edged sword personally, I'm not a huge fan of it because I do think that rural schools probably need the help the most.
Hmm.
Um, because especially, if you're a teacher that's serving, hundreds of kids, whether you're like their only English teacher through ninth grade through 12th, you're going to need help. However, on the other flip side of that, those rural counties, they knew what Trump was wanting to do, what President Trump was wanting to do. I mean,
Yeah.
he was trying to cut the Department of Education. He wanted to abolish it totally. He signed an executive order to get rid of it. So, I mean, they're getting what they voted for. I mean, nothing in this bill is surprising. Some things surprised me in a good way. However, I mean, this is what people voted for at the end of the day. People did want these kind of cuts.
Yeah.
So, do I feel sympathy for them? Not really, just because that is what the rural districts did vote for. So I guess they did want, less government involvement for whatever reasons, but I do think, it can hurt those populations of people. Um, Whether they knew exactly his stance or not, some people, my issue with voting is a lot of people that vote are uneducated. I'm not saying it's
Hmm.
just Trump voters, Obama voters, McCain, so many of these people.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say probably, I don't have a real number, but I'd say probably 60, 75% have no idea what they're actually voting for. I think they just vote for the name. They're like, oh, that guy's good looking. That guy's a good speaker. I'll vote for
Yeah.
him or her.
Who
So
are my friends voting for?
what
That
do
type
what
of
do my
thing too.
parents want?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So some of that stuff is good, some of it's bad. We'll get into some of the stuff a little bit later. I do think some of the stuff can be pretty good. Like for instance, Title One staying. I think that's a
Yep.
huge win.
That is. Yeah.
Help out our low income students. I was actually surprised. Like I said, there's surprises in good ways. That's staying. So is IDEA helping out students with disabilities. Huge. I was going to be very, very furious if President Trump's administration or this Congress was going to cut spending for our special needs students. They're still going to be able to stay in school until they're 21 years old. If you're a student that has Down syndrome or severe cerebral palsy or anything like that, you need all the help you can get. I work with a lot of great special education teachers, and they are incredible. The things that they do for these students are perfect. I mean, they're basically an adjunct parent in a way.
Yeah.
They care for these students. They love these students. Oftentimes, they teach them from 14 years old to 21. You get a serious bond with those students.
Yeah.
So it is important that they're staying. I do applaud Congress for at least keeping that in there, because if they got rid of that, there would probably be political like hell to pay, honestly.
Yeah, do you think the IDEA, especially staying, was from such of the some of the original backlash when this came out? In the initial plans of cutting Department of Education, what did that mean? You think it was always their plan to kind of keep it, or do you think it was, whoa, okay, we kind of hit a third rail there of
I
these
think there's
cuts?
probably some congressmen, like there's some congressmen, like for instance, Kyle Massey, representative out of Kentucky,
Mm,
who says no on every spending bill, absolutely everything. So I think he's probably one of those people that want to get rid of it. But I think he would probably get rid of literally every single department that we have, except for potentially the State Department. Um, I think there's gonna be a lot of no votes on that. A lot of people that want to get rid of that in general. But there's no way, especially with the House. Like we talked about the Senate being a slim majority. The House is razor thin, like
yeah,
razor
it
razor.
really is. It's
So
super interesting.
I know. So first off, like none of the Democrats would vote for that.
Yeah,
I think probably a super majority of Republicans wouldn't vote to get rid of that either. You probably have your, he's gone now, but your Matt Gaetzes and stuff like that that would want to get rid of it. And I just don't think it would have passed. I think having IDA is that was probably a deal breaker for a lot of congressmen and
yeah.
whoever really pushed for that. Round of applause for those guys and women.
Yeah. And well, I think a Title One too, just kind of looking at these again, who don't want to seem overly reactionary, and that we're just talking about this because of, obviously it's affecting education, but you don't want to just seem because of which administration's doing it. So,
Mhm.
a lot of these, like with IDEA and Title One staying, it does seem like a lot of these, this is the plan that's been stated of sending stuff back to the states. You're keeping IDEA, so it's a federally funded, taken care of, making sure no special education student falls behind in a state because the state's not giving those. So you're kind of keeping that umbrella. Same with Title One, where it's like low perform, underperforming, high poverty schools still have that. So when you kind of look at like and you kind of see uh the community centers or some of those things that help low performing schools, then it's like, well, Title One's still there. So it seems like those things like could go to the states. Like, hey, rural states, if you want to help your rural, or states, if you want to help your rural schools, you're going to have to do that. The federal government's just going to do these big overarching things.
Hmm.
And I think I think that's part of the plan. So we don't want to just make it sound like they're just like slashing slash slash. It's literally, hey, these are the things we think states can do if they pick it up. That's kind of on them. But we're keeping these two big things that should be there to make, I mean, this is why the federal government exists, right? To make sure that things that are uber important aren't missed by the states, that they aren't, or that states are doing them drastically differently. I mean, you could just imagine the headlines if Connecticut was like, all of our special education students are here and doing great, then some state, I don't always want to hit the South because, much love to the South. But, I don't want to hit that. So I'm going to go out west. Let's say Utah. Utah's like, nah, we're not doing that anymore. And they have like their special ed students just are like at home now, not getting services. Like that would be a really bad side by side. So I think
Hmm.
it's smart to kind of keep that federal, at least opportunity to go for it.
Absolutely.
And like, so, I
Yeah, and
mean,
they did.
go ahead.
No, you're good. Go.
I mean, I was just going to kind of talk a little bit about, some of the other things that you kind of pulled out here, like the Upward Bound and Gear Up, migrant education. Obviously, I think with the immigration bills, that was probably a pretty easy one, a spot that would be cut. Um,
Yeah.
Teacher quality partners, federal work studies. You and I were talking that before we started the show, and preschool development grants. So are there any of those that really kind of like fly out to you and are like, oh, this is something that like we kind of need to focus on, or something that like you're kind of shocked by?
I think, well, not shocked at all. Just the easy one, the migrant education. So we spent about $428 million on that, which is a large chunk of money.
Mm.
About a quarter of that, I think it was like 116 million went to California, which, always going to be the more like liberal state of the United States. So
Yeah.
with Congress kind of hitting that one made a lot of sense, especially like you said with Trump's like border policies, really tough on education, tough on immigration. That one was probably an easy one to go. One that I found pretty interesting though was the teacher quality partnership. So that one is kind of a drop in the bucket, $70 million, to the point where might as well kind of keep that one. But if I guess they're probably trimming the fat on that one. So basically, what that one does is it helps recruit teachers, um,
Mm.
especially when it considers to like pretty rough school districts. Oftentimes with those schools too, they help pay off student loans. If you take out, let's say, $48,000 in student loans for your bachelor's degree, you become a teacher. If you work at that school for I think it's 8 to 10 years, they will forgive your student loans, which is a huge benefit of that. Um, Now I can see why they cut that one because first off, I think it's a very difficult job to recruit teachers.
Yeah.
Teaching kind of sucks, if I'm being honest. I love it, you
Oh
love
yeah.
it. We are also freaks of nature.
Yeah.
Um, and I
Thrive
think
in
if you're
chaos. We've talked about this before. I've I don't know, like we almost become adrenaline junkies. Like if you were like, hey, go work in an office, even if you offered me a bunch more money, which, anybody watching this, it wouldn't be hard to offer a teacher more money than they're making. Like even if you offered me a bunch more money, I think I'd go crazy, or I'd be that guy that's at like everybody's cubicle. I'd just look like now I can't remember his. I look like the neighbor from Home Improvement. I just be like over the cubicle. Hey, what's up? What you doing? Hey, what you working on? Like just kind of peek it over because I would have to talk to somebody.
yeah,
Because all day we are talking, we're moving, we're adapting, like you said, being innovative, like being creative. Like there are so many times that I've been like, this is the perfect lesson. And then you go to like start your first part of it and the copier broke, you couldn't get copies. Your PowerPoint that explains the directions doesn't do that. Or you didn't know that one of the 9 million field trips was happening, so half your class is gone, so you can't really do the group activity. You have to be creative, right? Like, so it's, it is hard to, I'm with you on that. It's hard to train teachers because it's one when you tell people, oh, I mean, like, hey, you want to do this, it can be a thing. That's like kind of saying, like, oh, you're saying I can't handle kids. Like, no, can you handle kids 180 days in their 180 different moods and needs and like that? That's the job. and still get a result out of them. And that's not an easy thing to, even if you're like, hey, it can be rough sometimes, to, portray accurately.
Yeah, it's hard. I think you either you got it or you don't. I think it'd be very difficult because one, like we said earlier, you don't get paid a ton of money, so the money's not there. The only real benefit is the time off. We work 180 days a year, maybe a week or so in the summer. We get snow days off. I mean, at least in this up north or in the south, you get snow days and such. But
Yeah.
like you get days like that, which is beneficial. It's nice, but does it really make up for making very little money? Especially if you're a bachelor's degree, first year teacher, you make nothing.
Yeah.
You might as well like work at Lowe's. Very comparable salaries.
Hmm.
Um, so with us or the federal government cutting the recruitment, I do understand that one. I really do. It's only 70 million, so I could definitely argue keeping it. But if the job is to, trim the fat, I can definitely see that being fat. People know if they want to be a teacher or not. We did have a teacher crisis a couple of years ago, and they, at least the state of Tennessee, we both live in Tennessee. I will at least give the credit to Governor Lee and our state legislature, where they have been increasing pay. Every year I've been a teacher, I've gotten a raise, which I'm very grateful for. It's not earth shattering, but it is nice. I'd rather get paid more money than not get paid less money. So
Yes,
I've always
that is preferable.
that is preferable, or at
Yeah.
least stay the same. So like there is always increases, with teachers every year you do generally get more money. So that is nice. You're definitely playing the long game for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but it's hard to go to a 22-year-old and be like, hey, do you want to make nothing for 10 years? And be stressed out every day and potentially get shot or stabbed. No, it's
That
not
doesn't.
very appealing.
Yeah.
Those recruiters, I would love to speak to them. They're probably like military recruiters, like, oh, you'll be on a great island somewhere in the Pacific. It'll be beautiful. But no, you're really just storming some beach somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Or you end up in like Dubuque, Montana,
yeah, just in the middle of nowhere. I would
fighting
love that. I would love.
fighting
I'd love
off
it.
moose.
That is a dream job for me.
Just fighting off a moose. Yeah, I just want to be like just up there, like, what are we doing here? It's so flat. I like, if they put me in Kansas, I would cry. Just totally cry because it's so flat. Like, you can watch somebody run away for an entire weekend in Kansas. Like, if you just had a good pair of binoculars, like, he's still going. Oh, wait, he stopped. I think he's turning around. Like, you could legit do that in Kansas whole weekend. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it is tough to do that. It's basically saying, hey, how, like, when you get stressed, do you, break down, shut down, or just power through? Because if you're either of the first two, I don't know if you want to do it. If I don't, and that's a difficult thing to do. So I do get that cut, because we need a better way. We're trying to get quality teachers. Like, we are obviously not trying to say, hey, don't be a teacher, or we shouldn't have these programs to get them. But you also want to make sure, like, when you go through a teacher education program in a college, you bought in for, 4 years, and student teaching and all the things that go with it. It is harder, and people do it. Like I said, it's a difficult job. Sometimes it's just like, I can't do this. And, I'm happy when that happens. Those people can realize it, make a change, and find peace with themselves, and hopefully enjoy their careers. But you also don't want people being like, I got to do this 2 years and then I get my student loans paid for and then I'm out. That's the last thing we need in school. We're trying to stack this success. So I do see getting rid of that. And a lot of people would be like, oh, you don't want good teachers. I think this is a way to, kind of tear down the old and see what kind of grows in its place, either via the states, or they come up with, the federal government at some point comes up with a different program that may work.
Mhm.
The one that really got me too is a federal work study. That seems very, promoting, we're promoting jobs, like, hey, schools, let people go out and apprentice, let people try these things and get school credit for it. So you don't, again, we've talked about this many times. There are some seniors who should not be listening to Romeo and Juliet. They should know about Romeo and Juliet, right? That they should be, that avenue should be open to them. But breaking down the play act by act, scene by scene, to understand its methods and rhythms is not what, Jimmy is going to do. Jimmy is going to go do a job where he's going to make really good money, have a nice house, and have a good life with his wife and kids.
Mhm.
And to cut this kind of is pushing in the face of that, like, which I feel is a very kind of both party things. Like I don't think anybody's saying more plumbers. No, like I don't think Democrats or Republicans are saying that. They're saying yes, we want skilled people with good jobs. So that's a strange
Yeah,
thing.
Joe the plumber, never forget.
Yeah, gosh, I actually did forget about him until you said that. Um, and
Highlight of 2008.
that is a throwback. Yeah. Wow. A good old 2008. So yeah, so I think it's a strange thing to just be like, yeah, hey, and do you think this is one of those things that's going back to the States? Like, hey, you want to train your people?
Yeah, I think so. I believe under Governor Haslam, so he was the governor before Bill Lee. He was really, I think both of our last two governors, our current one and our previous one, I think they did a good job of like trying to incorporate um, more hands-on, actual vocational based learning. Like for instance, with Haslam, he passed the Tennessee Promise, where all high school students graduated after I believe 2014. They get 2 years free of community college or trade school. Now I
Hmm.
think that's great
Yeah.
because like you said, if these seniors learning Romeo and Juliet, sorry English teachers, but who cares? I don't care about Romeo and Juliet. Are there some good things to learn about breaking down plays? Of course, but do we need to do that for 13 years of K through 12? Probably not. By the time these kids are 16, 17, 18, sometimes 19, um, teach them some kind of job skills. I know a lot of schools have like healthcare and like
Hmm.
welding and wood shop. Those things can actually get people jobs.
Right.
Agriculture, especially in the South, agriculture is so like such a large portion of our job base. Even out west too, like in Utah, it's a big industry out there.
Yeah.
So it's important to kind of have these things. I wonder if that will pass through the Senate. I wonder if they'll tweak that one because nine almost $1 billion they're cutting out. That is the
Yeah.
biggest, second biggest cut.
Yeah.
So that is major. I disagree with that one, and also with work study. I mean, these college kids too. I know this education cuts are mostly going to affect higher education.
Hmm.
However, with and this does go into higher education. If you're a student, if you fill out your FAFSA, it asks you if you want to do work study. So that's whether you're working at the library or whatever the case may be, you do get some kind of payment in there. It's not much payment, but it's something that goes toward your tuition, and it does give them a reliable job on campus. You don't have to go too far. If you're living in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee, you can walk to your job. You're basically living at your job.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to get hours, build rapport, getting those communication skills, like those soft skills that you really need once you finish college, enter the workplace, even out of high school. You don't always need to go to college to be successful. I would argue you don't. Most people don't need college, which is a
Yeah.
hot take from a teacher. But you
Right.
don't. Most people.
Yeah. I mean, well, and I think that's where I mean, a lot of society is going to where, I mean, growing up, you know, if I would have, neither of my, I'm a first generation college student, right? Neither of my parents went to college. You know, if I would have uttered, "Hey, I don't want to go to college," I don't know if I would have seen where my dad came from, but I just know I would be going that way. I'd be flying across the room and be like, "I didn't work this hard for you not to go to college," because that was the avenue to better jobs. Where now I think we're seeing a little more equity. Like we're seeing these jobs pay out that they're more talked about. Again, apprentice, an electrician, plumbers. I mean, some business areas where you can get in like you don't need that much. And I want anybody who wants to go, I want them to go, but it shouldn't have to be like, hey, if you don't do this, you'll never get this tier. I don't think that should be a thing. I think, hey, if your job requires that type of training or your desired career desires that type of training, yes, you have to go do the training. You have to go get those skills. And I think it's important, and that's what high school works on, the well-rounded. But again, college kind of geared towards that career. So I'm with you that it's, if somebody, I think the stigma of you have to go to college or else like, oh, you won't make that. I think that's going away in America. And I think it's now like, hey, go do something you're good at because that helps you and it helps all of us. Where instead it was, I mean, like, I'm pretty sure my graduating class, I had like 251 students in high school, you know, early 2000s. I'm pretty sure that probably 100 of them wanted to be lawyers
Yeah.
because that was the job at the time. That was the thing to go into. And that's like, did they really want to be lawyers, or was that like, oh, that'll be good money, and I'm smart enough to do it? So, absolutely. And kind of looking at these, we're talking about cutting these programs. So, and I think a lot of this goes into it, and we've kind of jumped into that a little bit. It's like, these cuts we talked about this in the open. You know, I've always said on the show, I'll always say, teaching is a profession of the soul. You have to care, you have to love it. But we talked about it's a service. So when you're cutting these, like some of the people getting left behind is what's scary. If states are slow to pick up the slack. And again, we don't know any of like the rolling out plan of this. So it's just kind of talking about what could happen. But if some states are having difficulty finding that, we talked about the English learning program. Like that gets a little weird to me, because I get that you're trying, like, it's not illegal to speak another language and to want to learn English. Okay. Like we're gonna make that clear. So and we both were like, oh, well, due to his immigration policy, that makes sense. But does it? Like, is that being too broad of a stroke? Like, oh, well, clearly I'm trying to get rid of illegal immigrants, right? We're only going after illegals, but now we're going to cut English services. I mean, so if you're here, like public school, you're here legally, how do you learn English? And that's the weird area, is that like you don't want a policy that many people agree with of making sure illegals aren't in the country to turn into a type of xenophobia, to where if you're not from here, then why are you speaking Spanish? Well, I mean, we legally immigrated. I just speak Spanish.
Yeah, and that's kind of an issue too. So um, with these cuts too, so cutting English learning for K through 12, I think that's absolutely ridiculous because we do not need to punish these children. Same with
Right.
like, for instance, with DACA. I mean, this was I think rolled out under the Bush administration. If I'm not, I think it was 2001, 2002 was the first time we actually saw DACA. It
Hmm.
really caught fire underneath President Obama.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think he really pushed it into the forefront.
yeah, exactly. Because I remember Dick Durbin and Orrin Hatch. Yeah, it was those two. They co-sponsored the bill, so it was bipartisan in 2001, 2002. And if you're 2 years old, if your parents came here from Mexico, Guatemala, or even you know
Poland.
France, Poland,
It
yeah,
doesn't always have to be Spanish. I think that's
doesn't
what people get confused.
yeah, we have immigrants all over the world. We're the most
Yeah.
immigrated country in the entire world. So if you come from another country, and I would say it's much harder if you come from Poland, because a lot
Right.
of people in America speak Spanish, at least
Yeah.
have basic understanding. I don't know a single word in Polish. I know a lot in Spanish, but so when it comes to that, like you need to learn, like you need to give those kids the ability to learn the language that they're assimilating to.
Mhm.
So for adults, I understand cutting that funding. If you're an adult, you can get Duolingo, you can get Rosetta Stone, whatever.
Right.
For the children who have to go through this school, I have several English learners every single year. And in August, it's a struggle. It really
Yeah.
is hard to teach them. But, they tell us, they instruct us to, which I believe is a state law, we have to speak to them in English. I kind of break that sometimes. My Spanish is very, very broken. Usually, oftentimes, their English is better than my Spanish, but I try to bridge the gap a little bit.
Right.
Um, just kind of make them, build that rapport because that's really what this is. It's not about teaching them the date of D-Day. It's about building that relationship and getting them to want to learn from you in your class, build the skills necessary to advance to the next grade or college if they're senior. So it is important for them to children to learn English. Give them all the resources they can because it's very difficult to learn English. It's one of the hardest languages to learn. Cutting spending on that, I think, is a huge disservice to so many children across the country. I mean, we have so many. I mean, there's so many immigrants in the United States. A lot of people that don't speak English. Until like what, a month or two ago, we did not have an official language in the United States.
Yep.
So there was really no real incentive to learn English. Now there is. So you would think that they were put more money into learning English, especially in those K through 12 schools. On the flip side of that, I really, it's kind of off subject, but I really believe that the United States Department of Education and even all 50 state Department of Educations, because there's 51 technically in this country, they need to implement learning other languages.
Hmm.
If I was the president of the United States, that's one thing I would really push for. K through 12, they need to take a foreign language,
Yeah.
specifically Spanish. I would argue Spanish just because they're our neighbors. Maybe if you're in New England or even like Michigan, learn some French too, because Quebec is right there. Canada, they have two official languages in Canada, English and French.
Hmm.
Being able to communicate with more people, being able to um, learn in other languages, that is super important, especially if you ever want to get into business, if you ever want to travel overseas, join the military. Those are skills that is very difficult to teach. If you can
Yeah.
learn multiple languages, man, those job opportunities increase. My father, for instance, he has an eighth grade education. He did get his GED, but he speaks, I think, 5 languages. He was in the military. They
Wow.
taught him. Yeah, he's
That's
very, very
crazy.
smart in different ways. Yeah, he speaks
Yeah.
Korean, English, of course, Spanish, German, and something else. I think French, maybe. Traveled all over, 21 years in the military.
Yeah.
Um, and he's always had steady employment. He's retired now, but steady employment. One of those reasons I would bet because he's able to communicate with so many people. That's why he's always had international jobs. If we could do that for a lot of students, if you're a student that, you're a C student, you're probably not going to be a doctor, but you can speak 2 languages. You can go to
Yeah.
Mexico and good business degree. You can run businesses in other places. There's a lot of ways to make money in this country and in this world. And cutting language, I know that's kind of a tangent, but being able to communicate with vast populations is a huge skill that I wish that we had in our country. Because if you
Yeah.
go to other countries, like I have a Russian friend, speaks 4 languages.
Yep.
It's a great job. Most they learn that from, primary school all the way on. Why are we
Yeah,
not doing
it's
it?
it's proximity too. Like, when you're in France, it's not, you ride the train to Belgium, to Germany, you know what I mean? Like Austria, you have so many areas you can get to quickly, so you kind of learn it via proximity. In America, we've been kind of oceans two sides. Canada, they speak English, so you're going to speak what we speak. Mexico, we're just like, eh. Like we never really tried. And it is strange to me. I completely agree. The fact that we were like, hey, now that you're, the book, The Two Backpacks. Don't forget to go jordanlauer.com, you know, and check out the website. But in there we talk about how the brain develops. And we are like, hey, now that you're in high school, you need to learn a language. A lot of districts, to give credit, a lot of districts are starting, Spanish even lower, like seventh, sixth, seventh grade. Some places even lower. But the fact that like their brain is developing in that process, and now you're trying to put this thing in when it could assimilate, like, you assimilate a language when you're young, you learn it when you're older. You know,
Perfect.
so like it's like, why don't we have this when they're younger? Like it should be, and people are like so afraid. Like and we see it's Americans sometimes have weird fears that we have very tangible answers to, that like we can like see examples. Like I feel Americans have this fear, like, well, if I teach my kids Spanish when they're young, what if they just start speaking Spanish? It's not going to happen. Like they're going to speak what you speak to them, and if
Speak 2 languages. You can be bilingual.
yeah, it's like, well, we see, like we just said, your dad knows five. People like your Russian friend is, four. Like, I had a tour guide one time when I went over to England, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I speak three, four languages." I was like, "Do you just like do extra time?" He's like, "Well, you learn one or two in school, and then you travel, and you just start to pick up the words." He's like, "The more you know, the more you realize they're the same, and you can build on that." And I'm like, yes. And guess what? He still spoke English because he lived in England. He could just say words and not sound stupid. Like if I tried to speak Spanish, it wouldn't go well. Uh, so,
Mucho
uh,
gringo.
yeah, they'd be like, "Oh, well, look at this big gringo. He's clearly lost." So, and I would love to, and that's one of my bucket, it's one on my bucket list here. I always try to give myself a couple things. Want to learn Spanish, want to learn guitar. Um, well-rounded, so it's going to happen sometime. But yeah, I think we totally should do that, and we should do it at a young age. And a lot of private schools do that, and that shouldn't just be a purview of a private school. Like that should be, again, you can start with small words. We're not saying that by fourth grade they have to be complete, writing out full paragraphs in Spanish. Just being able to, once again, assimilate it enough to once to speak it. What's with, so like, look at this. We also see a thing with this. We talked about the English learners. A lot of this too, and this is kind of, when people talk about like there's nefarious plots and all that. Like I try to like look at an overview and not panic. Like I try to look at the long term. Okay, like if you think that, what's it doing right now, and what would the long term thing be? And one of the negatives, one of the knocks here is that a lot of these things affect low income and marginalized communities. Like a lot of these programs, there aren't many suburban soccer moms who are going to have a problem with these cuts because it's just frankly not coming into their area. And that's like you kind of look at now. I'm gonna give the counter, just because thinking of it, like obviously low income areas need more funding. Like there's a reason that they're getting this help, but to cut it just kind of, I feel like it's kind of like, well, we'll see what happens. Good luck. And that's a weird thing to, again, with a service, If we were making something in those areas, we just cut the factory. It's like, okay. But services, it's hard to cut from an area that needs them.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, do you think when you see that, do you think that it's frankly a factor of, hey, this is where a lot of the money's going, so is it breaking eggs to make an omelet? Like we want to cut some things and then we'll see where we can rebuild them, or do you think it could be like, hey, these are areas that, is there a tinge of politics to it?
I think every decision like this is definitely political in some form or fashion. And I
Mhm.
think with this one, this is something I've really been wrestling with. And to be frank, I don't know the answer. I think what you're right. I think it's a wait and see thing. But with me, my gut feeling, and this is something I've been thinking about for a while. So I guess it was my gut feeling, but more I think about it, I think this is what the plan is. I think the plan really is to push the states to really pick up the slack. I think the federal government is making an action saying, "Hey, we're cutting." And now, if I'll pick on the South, Mississippi, if you're serious about increasing your test scores, having a higher graduation rate, a lower poverty rate, lower crime rate, lower recidivism rate, pick up the slack, increase your property taxes, increase your sales tax. I think Mississippi does not have a sale income tax, maybe an income tax, and you can even tier it. If your household makes under like 100,000, maybe status quo. If you make above that, maybe you start leveling it off, and you make million, 2 million, 3 million, etc. Tax them higher. And if you're making $10 million, those ultra wealthy people, um, they can kind of feel the brunt of it. Not to sound all Bernie Sanders like, but
Feel the
you
burn, man.
know,
Feel the
feel
burn.
the burn. But no, that's seriously it. I mean, I think that's a push by the federal government to really make the states react to it. Now, for instance, if that is the case, and Connecticut, like you said earlier, if their test scores keep going up and up and up, there's special needs students, or there's not a lot of rural in Connecticut, but those lower performing schools, they start increasing because they're putting more resources, state funded resources, into their education system, and they're showing results. Whereas Mississippi, let's just say Mississippi just doesn't really react to it. They're taking the cuts, they're feeling the brunt of it. Their test scores are going down, their poverty's increasing. Then the federal government, because by the time we're really feeling it, it's probably going to be a presidential election year. It always switches, so my gut feeling is probably going to be. It's been weird the last couple of terms because we had two one-term presidents. It's been weird,
Yeah.
so I don't know what's 2028 is going to bring. But let's say it is a Democratic president. Um, that president, whoever it's going to be, can point to Mississippi like, "Hey, they followed the tax cuts or the education cuts, and they're struggling. So we're going to bring some of that more spending toward education, and that's a political win for the Democratic Party on that one. So I think it is. It's going to really wait and see what the states do, because I think it's going to fall back on the state and local governments to really pick up the slack for this. Um, because education is not in our United States Constitution; it is delegated to the states underneath the 10th Amendment. Therefore, states get to choose their education.
Yep.
One thing that I always cringe at when I see is, especially with Donald Trump is and a lot of other like high-ranking Republican leaders, it's like, oh, all education is going back to the states now. Well, it already was with the states. Really, the
Right.
only thing the federal government does, a little bit of oversight, a little bit, and then money.
Yep.
Oftentimes with block grants or categorical grants. So I think that's what it is. I think it's a wait and see. Are the states going to react to it? Is Mississippi going to react to it? Is Tennessee? Is Connecticut? Utah? Really, we'll see. And I think that's when we're going to see some clear winners and losers because of that.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Like states do it. This is a pressure thing. It's kind of pulling the rug out and saying, "Hey, we're not backing this up anymore. Do your thing." And we've talked about like the Department of Education since Carter is just it has ballooned because of things they took on, the money they were giving out. So this is kind of hey, it's going back to you. We'll provide oversight like we're supposed to, but like you said, the a lot of people because of like No Child Left Behind. I think people got this idea that the Department of Education was legit telling states what to do, and that's just not the case. I mean, No Child Left Behind was a federal plan to meet these standards, but it wasn't like they were saying they still weren't creating curriculum. They still weren't really like saying what curriculum had to be other than the style for No Child Left Behind. But it was just more of like, jump on if you want to, you could get this money if you do well. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought that it was like this on high decree where it was like, you must teach this. And like states were like, oh, we hate it. But the federal government, no, they hated it, but they wanted the money. So that's why they hated it because they chose to do it.
And
And
I
I
think it's
think,
another thing.
go ahead, man.
There you go. I think it's kind of what you said. I think you just kind of hit something really important about it being political too. Do these state governments really have the best interest in these students, or do they want money? And that's always kind of a thing that I kind of worry about. And we said earlier too, like, are they being nefarious or malicious? I generally don't think so. I don't think any
Right.
politician generally comes in there, unless you're like your George Soros, or some of the other crazy ones. There's some real weirdos that get into Congress. They're
Yeah.
usually one termers.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a lot of nefarious actors in politics. I think they become that way. I think generally speaking, I try to think the best in people, even though I'm highly negative over any government, state, local, federal.
Right.
But I do think, with education, with No Child Left Behind or Head Start or with College Department of Education, I think they're all well intended. I really do. Do I think that they all work? No, I don't. And I think it has ballooned so much that it's to the point where I'm open for experimental things. Like whenever President Trump, was campaigning on abolishing the Department of Education, one, I didn't think he would actually do it. Not surprised. I mean, it's still technically there. It's still there.
Right.
Congress has to get rid of it. Do I think it's going to happen? I doubt. I think it's such a political, like, dumpster fire. It's not going to happen. Cut back, maybe. Be less involved. I get it. Trim the fat on the spending. I'm okay with that. But like we said at the top of the show, man, where are we cutting it? Some parts of it are good, some of it are bad. Um, but I think when it comes to the state level, if they're getting this money, I, some of them are bad actors. I mean, every
Yep.
profession has bad actors, and politicians. I mean, it's pretty easy to find bad actors in that. Um, so, do they want the money? Do they want the best interests of children? I think it's a little bit of both, and I think sometimes, when you get these power hungry governors, I think they're just going to take the money. Not saying they're buying yachts with it, but they're misusing the funds. I do think a
Right.
lot of it, I think a lot of the money is being misused, and I think a lot of them are just so out of touch with reality. Most of these people, being a governor is a very difficult job. You're the head of an executive. You have so many realms you're looking at. Many of these people, I don't know any governors that have been teachers,
No. Yeah,
and
I
it's
can't think of
like
any.
they don't know what they're doing. As
Yeah.
bad as that is, not to crap on all 50 governors, but I think a lot of them, they've never stepped foot in a classroom. They really haven't.
It's
Or
like we
president,
talked.
I mean, there's early
It's like,
presidents that have been teachers, but not many.
yeah, well, it's like we talked about like different things. It's the same. It's a Hollywood problem with classrooms, right? Like you watch these movies and it's showing a classroom or a school, and I'm like, did none of the people here go to a school, or did you all go to like fancy island? Like there's people in 9-inch high heels. All their lockers are outside all the time. Apparently, there's no bell system. The teachers are just in the room, like helping the bully the other kid. Like I've never
Hard to
seen that.
watch sometimes.
Yeah, I've never seen that. So I also feel like kind of governors and some politicians are like that. They like remember what their school is like. They kind of hear some things, but they really don't know exactly what goes on, exactly what's needed. Um, or just again, like we talked about, the constant struggle. And that kind of leads us into our next thing is the myth of the marketplace kind of creeping in education. Just kind of that lack of knowledge, I think, goes with that. Like we've talked, we did a whole episode on school vouchers, um, and the different things they could mean in the state. So obviously not going to relitigate all that, but you know, uh, it just kind of it to me, it's the same argument as the post office when they're like, abolish the post office. That's a big push. And some people are like, it wastes so much money. And I'm like, it's a service. It's not a business. It is not intended to make a dime. The fact that it does make a dime is kind of a bonus. You know what I mean? Like that they've added those things to like help it. Like it's governments have things that lose money. Like it is
Yeah.
a fact of government. If you are going to have a government that is actually doing things, there will be things that will waste money because that's what services do. Like you can't always expect, I mean, could you imagine if the fire department pulled up and was like, "Hey, we don't want to raise taxes, so Your silver package, we spray the house a good 2 times. If the fire's still going, your
You're on
gold
your own.
package, we soak her down. Your platinum package, we use the gel and we'll get all your stuff and you'll be good. That would be terrifying. And it's kind of like that with schools. They're like, oh, they waste so much money. I promise you, like, and one of the problems here too is we're talking about the marketplace and this idea is how much more has stuff just costed? When I was in school, the big purchase was we got this cart with a TV and a VCR, and then we did spend money for DVD players on top of them. But that bad boy, you were rolling that thing in the room for the next 10 years, a one-time purchase. Computers, we say every kid needs a device. I don't think people realize those devices last maybe 3 years.
Mhm.
I mean, the stuff like that's just physically happening to them being carried around by a 10, 12, 13, 14-year old, but then just programs being outdated and saying, hey, and so we have to get new ones. And those things cost money, and you can't always slash things or say it's costing too much to be able to provide that. If we want the kids to have that, it will be a thing where you lose some money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we do spend a lot of money on with the vouchers too, man. I wonder how that's going to really affect. I mean, if anyone's listening in Tennessee, I mean, we did pass that Education Freedom Act. I know you guys talked about that plenty. So I want to rehash that too, but that could be a thing nationwide, and that is something that's going to be really interesting to study 10 years from now to see how this actually worked. Because right now we're going to be in the wait and see. I know certain states have done that. It's worked. It hasn't worked. We'll kind of see. Um, I believe, if not mistaken, the Supreme Court's hearing that right now, if they can do that. I think that'll actually stand. There is legal precedent, like Zellman versus Harris in 2002, I believe, where they covered that. And that was, again, a 5-4 decision, so it was close. Basically, you can use school vouchers if they're not, if they have to be secular. You cannot use it for religious-based schools, which I'm kind of okay with that. If you're a student that you're an A student, like from a parent's perspective, if you're like an A student in a really, really rough school, and there's a school right down the road you can go to, send them there. I'm kind of okay with that one, but I do think it is a slippery slope. Is it legal? Probably. Is it going to be the right thing for a country? Probably not. And that is the gray line. I mean,
Mm,
politics in general, education, a lot of these decisions, there's no real clear answer. And that's why you have to experiment sometimes and
yep.
you have to own your mistakes if it's wrong. If it's wrong, you have to correct it. And one thing I do have to give credit for President Trump with, he is a pragmatic human being. If he sees something unpopular, he tends to fix it, at least tries to. He's somebody that doesn't have, he reminds me a lot of Hillary Clinton, which that's a very shocking comparison.
He
But both
may
of
have
them flip
just
flop.
like
They both flip flop all
we
the
may
time.
get banned if the administration hears that. They just might like shut down the page.
Absolutely. I think that they're very. I didn't vote in 2016. I'm gonna be honest, and because one, Hillary
Too
Clinton,
too
I didn't
stressful.
trust her. I didn't trust her. Trump didn't trust him. Was like, well, first off, you're a billionaire, never held office. Why are you running for president? I thought it was kind of a joke, kind of like when Kanye ran in 2020. So I didn't vote. I stood out of that one. But one thing that people criticized Hillary Clinton on in 16 was she flip flopped a lot. And I was like, is that a bad thing? Or did she just get new evidence and change her mind? Because
Yeah.
nobody wants somebody that sticks to their guns. That's my criticism for Senator Sanders is he doesn't really listen to outside opinions. He kind of sticks to his guns no matter what. And I don't like that. And one thing I do like about Trump is he does flip flop. He will flip flop on a lot if he's presented with very unpopular decisions. Because if you listen to anything Trump ever says, the dude's full of himself. He loves to win. And he always
Yeah.
says winning is everything. He loves to win. Another win today. It's June whatever. We're winning today. And if he's fighting a losing thing, kind of like these tariffs, they're kind of cutting those back. That's a whole other story with the
Right.
tariffs. But if he sees a losing position, he's probably going to back away from that. And I think with these vouchers, with a lot of these cuts, if they're producing really poor results, I think we're going to see the next spending bill fund these schools a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm with you on the flip-flopping thing. I've always been like, I get it if you flip-flop on a fundamental thing and it seems performative. If
Yeah,
you're like, guns should be banned, and then it's like, Senator blah 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 had a 2 hour meeting with the NRA, and they're like, I love guns. Like, yes, that's
like Gavin Newsom's doing that right now, and like
right.
Do I believe him? I don't know. He says all the right things, but I don't know. There's some of those guys I don't really know. But with Hillary, I mean, she was kind of like her resume is just like her or not. I mean, her resume is kind of perfect. Like
Oh, it's crazy. I was going over that this week.
presidential
It's a
wise, I mean,
crazy
that's kind
resume.
of who you want.
You're right.
It's kind of who you want.
Yeah.
But it's kind of how that goes. It's just I don't know. I think if this is a really if this passes through the Senate and President Trump signs it, and in 2 years from now, well, I believe all the cuts would start October 26th, if I'm not mistaken. So by the time we start seeing results, 2028, you know what 2028 is? It's an election year. So we'll see if they're good. Then I think Republicans are probably going to do okay in the House, and the Senate, and the White House. If they're doing poorly, it might be a blue wave going on.
Yeah, I think it's really going to, I mean, this is, like it is interesting for like when you talk about President Trump's want to win. It's interesting because it's not only like a want to win, it's almost a want to win in the moment. Because if you really think it, like it's not, it's reactive want to win. Like, oh, I'll
Mhm.
do this. This is what people want. Oh, it didn't work. I'll switch it. Where a lot of people want to win like long term. So it's really interesting to think of what could happen in a couple years, especially in the midterms, if these don't go well. And the National Education Association explained, the NEA stated that they argue that the cuts starve public schools to justify alternatives. And that's kind of what we mean by the myth of the market here. What we're talking about is like that's the kind of scary, going over to conspiracy corner every once in a while. We'll take a little walk to conspiracy corner. Um, is is that an argument? Because you think about it, a lot of people are like, oh, it's alternatives, right? But an alternative, when you're talking about funding from the same place, if you're like, hey, this is public education funding, it's like, now we're going to give this to the vouchers. Here's their funding. You're like, well, you're not really setting them up for success,
Mhm.
which you're trying to push that because it is privatized. It is a way for people to make money. Dr. Jackson and I talked about this on the episode we talked about where, I made the statement that like they've been trying to get into education. And by they, I mean, billionaires, millionaires, people, entrepreneurial spirit, people like, oh, how do we crack that? And he said like, well, they have like textbooks and testing. Yeah, that's a very niche, like you have to be able to do that. But like to make money on the word education, like public education, is an interesting thing. And I feel that's, kind of what the vouchers want to do. And you do argue again about who's being left behind. Is this a way of starving it to be like, well, we need more options in our town? Like, I don't know. It's scary. I don't want it. I don't want it to cause problem. Like you said, it's a wait and see thing. It's nothing. And a lot of us always want instant reaction, instant gratification. We want the facts now. It's why everything, if you go on social media nowadays, anything that happens, especially in the political world, instant victory for the side that gets it. Nobody's like, oh, we'll wait and see what happens. No, they're like, no, we won. It passed. It's like, oh, okay. Like, is it going to work? And like, but it passed. And I'm like, cool, good for you. Like, that's awesome. And that's what these are. We gave some examples in that episode about how they have ballooned some budgets. It'll be interesting to see that because, whew, like budgets might be ballooning for states, might have to rate state taxes. You mentioned income tax for states that don't have it. It's logical. Like a lot of people think we'll have these cuts, but still provide these services, but nothing will be done. I'm like, no, that means they're going to get their money. Like you're not going to like it when they're like, hey, your property tax increased. Uh, and it's just the way they do it. So,
Yeah, I know.
well, how do you feel about them kind of, what do you think about them kind of saying that this is a way of starving it just to make more opportunities for privatization?
See, this is what's confusing me, and that always kind of makes me think of the wait and see thing, where like I want to know what education is going to look like in 10 years. And one thing that I always kind of come back on is I do think there's going to be a lot more specialized schools. Now, we do have laws in the books, and every state's a little bit different, but I believe in Tennessee, you have to stay in school until you're 18 years old.
Mhm.
On your 18th birthday, you can drop out, do whatever you want, you're done. Um, I would like to see, some kind of pathway for those struggling students, especially like in rural districts. Like, I know it's kind of rehashing what we said a little bit ago, but in 10 years, I wonder if we'll have schools that are you get out of, maybe leave ninth, 10th grade, and there's these schools specific for job training, like plumbing, electrician, that kind of stuff. And I do think with these voucher programs, I think, you can get some entrepreneurs or some companies, like some big, like Hiller, the HVAC people, where they can create their own school. Be like, hey, we're going to train HVAC people the way we want them. We're going to start them young at 16 years old. They turn 18 years old, they're going to be a licensed HVAC technician and they can make good money, make more money than you and I do. And that is a huge pathway, I think. And I mean, that's looking at the bright side of these voucher programs, but a lot of these voucher programs, they don't have a lot of oversight. Many of these, you do not need a teaching license to actually teach at. And
Yeah.
that's another kind of scary thing is because, we always see the horror stories of, this teacher doing this criminal activity and that kind of stuff. And yeah, background checks work and all, but do we really know a person? Like, do they actually, how were they vetted?
Hmm.
I love the school I'm at, but my interview lasted 20 minutes. I was hired on the spot. I'm a good person, I'm a good teacher, but I could have been serial killer. I could have been whatever, and they wouldn't have really known because they probably didn't vet me that well. Um, Luckily, I'm neither of those things. They hired the right person. Love my job, but it is
I'm
true. I
also
mean,
happy you're not a serial killer.
I'm also happy,
That's a
but
good development for me. Um, so appreciate it.
yeah, so like things like that, like those charter schools, like I want to know what the oversight is for those. Like, would I be comfortable sending my child to one of these charter schools when I don't know what their education is? I don't know who these students are. Are they left alone? I like, for instance, whenever I have students in my room, if it's like during a study hall when they're making up a test, coming for tutoring, I leave that door open. No matter what. If it's one-on-one, I know by law we have to keep doors closed. I don't care. I don't. I'll take the write up. I'll take whatever. I'll take whatever punishment. I'm not going to be alone with the student. I don't care
Right.
if it's a boy, girl, whatever. Keep it open. Keep transparency because I want to ensure everybody's safe at all times. I want a principal to walk in at my room any time of the day and feel welcome. All the students feel safe and all of that. Charter schools, not to crap on charter schools, but I just don't know if they have that kind of security, transparency, and all of that stuff. So, excuse me. So that's why I'm kind of concerned about how education is going to look in 10 years. If these charter schools, these vouchers, because anyone I think really could create a private school. We have some of
Yeah.
these major ones like Nashville. We live in Nashville, and like there's private schools everywhere. Some of
Yes,
them
there
are
are.
really, really high dollar that cost more than my college education. I'm getting a doctorate now. Like all the money I've spent in college for 1 or 2 years, that is what their ninth grade is. Like that's kind of
No,
uh,
thank you. My kid was like,
yeah.
"Can I
So
go
like I
there?"
would
I'd be like, "Nah, no, you can't." I was like, "You
not
can go
even
there. You
no,
can
we're
go
not even
there to watch
kidding.
like a basketball game, where you cannot attend there."
Absolutely not. And I do think, I think college a lot of times is a scam. I think private schools are also a scam. I think you can get like Innsworth as a very prominent school in Nashville. The tuition's like 20 something grand a year. So about 80 grand to 100 grand for 9 through 12. That's a like law degree.
Yeah, that's
Why are you wasting it?
yeah,
It's a
that's
problem.
yeah. And then what would really, we get into private schools, what really are you paying for? So yeah, it's it's definitely a tough thing to go into and look at because you get that people want choice, but then can you also get we want a choice, but then we're paralyzed by, it's paralysis by analysis, right? Like, will become like, the transfer portal in college football. Just like people are like, nope, nope. And like you're just bouncing around to schools because one thing you don't like. I mean, I'm sorry to tell you, Becky, but like 112 years ago, your option would have been the one woman in the one school room with K through 12.
Yeah.
Like sometimes like this is what we do have. This is the best system we've had thus far. And I don't think it should not be changed or evaluated, but just kind of making these options and again taking funds, private schools, if they want to charge that and they don't take public funds, okay. But like when you're talking about kind of siphoning off public funds for, like you said, a lot of question marks. And again, not saying that any are inherently bad or dangerous, but there like when we both were teachers, they knew you weren't a serial killer because you had to do a TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation background check. Like those, I'm sure those are teacher standards and everything, but still, it's like when you're a private company, there are different rules. Um,
Mhm.
you don't have to do as much of as many of those things, and that's sometimes where things happen. So it's definitely a topic that I think we can continue to look at, and once we get more information, and once a lot of these things get going, or they're in the States longer, it can be really enlightening to see how it went. Because I'm totally fine when I've said this before when we did this like Department of Education is out episode or the voucher episode. I am 100% being fine being wrong, especially if it's things go
Yeah.
well. If I'm like, hey, this could be bad and it's not bad, I'm not going to be like, oh, dang it, those kids didn't suffer. Like I'm not, that's not going to be me. I'm like, oh, I was wrong. Cool. I'm glad the kids are happy and this actually worked. So, and a lot of people don't think of it that way. They always think like if you're talking about it and you're not being like, this is great, you just want it to fail. It's like, no, I want to ask the question. That way we can look into it and then see if we're right or wrong. Um, One thing, we were talking about some of the money and the states getting it, and I know you work a lot with this, so if you don't mind, kind of a brief explanation of, this money comes from the federal government to the states in the form of grants.
Mhm.
Often there's usually categorized grants and block grants. If you could kind of explain if you wouldn't mind for our viewers, just so they can kind of get when they hear that, so they can kind of understand the difference.
Yeah, of course. And I wish we'd have brought that up earlier because I think we both have said block grants 100 times already.
Right.
It is what it is. So there's really four ways that
You
school.
can listen to this, rewind, and then you'll totally get what we're talking about, and then jump back.
Yeah, so there's about four ways that states get money from the federal government. The first is revenue sharing, which we have not had revenue since the Clinton administration. So kind of nix that one. There's also mandates, which that happens like, okay, the states do that in order to get this money. But the
Yep.
ones that we are really talking about are block grants, categorical grants. So I like to say block grants are broad grants. Easy to kind of remember that one. So an example of that would be if the federal government's going to give all states, all 50 states, block grants. So this is for education. A lot of things you can spend money on education. Now, a categorical grant, and also with block grants, there's little to no oversight. Like, hey, I'm going to give you 50 million, the state of Tennessee, $50 million for education. Spend it however you see fit. Now, categorical grants, for instance, it has to fit a certain category. So, for instance, state or the federal government's going to give all 50 states, here's $50 million to revamp your school buses. Now, the what this administration is doing with the big beautiful bill is they're kind of nixing a lot of the categorical grants and turning them into block grants, um, which I think could be good because I think that could get rid of a lot of waste. So, for instance, with that same example, if all 50 states get $50 million for school buses, what if the state of Tennessee is like, we don't need school buses? What we need is more Chromebooks for our students in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yep.
And now, like, I have to spend $50 million on school buses that we don't need. I wish I could use that for laptops because that's what our students absolutely need. Because the needs in Tennessee is different than Alaska, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Michigan. Some school buses are great. Some states have great school buses, some don't. It is what it is. So I do think that's a good thing. That's one thing I was kind of relieved seeing is the block grants, turning a lot of that into block grants where if Tennessee, we need more Chromebooks, then we can use that $50 million for however we need it to. And whether that is increasing teacher pay, give them like a one-time stipend, that could be more textbooks or maybe getting updated software to get more like apps that we actually need to facilitate education. Because there's a lot of apps that are very, very beneficial to student learning. I know you and I are both big AI people, and it makes things a lot easier for research, especially. Oh my goodness, it's life changing.
Yeah.
So getting those kind of programs on your computer, whether it's getting licenses, that $50 million could go a long way.
Yeah.
So I do think block grants could be good, whether it's like hiring a new nurse or getting SROs or whatever the case, whatever your school district needs, you have that flexibility to do that. On the flip side, with there being such lack of oversight, they could spend their money in very poor ways. Um, and then that's going to have to go with transparency. I do think that our federal government, state and local governments, they do need to be a lot more transparent what they're spending this money. Where is our taxpayer money going to? Where is this grant money going? Is if it's going to useless nonsense, then that's when you start voting those people out. Get some people that are more fiscally responsible because Congress generally they're not the most fiscally. responsible people, considering our nation is what $34 trillion in debt, and
Yeah.
we have balanced budget in what 1999, which is not that long
No, it's not. No,
ago.
not when you're talking accrued debt, like for a
And I
nation.
don't. I was listening to Ron Johnson speak. He's the senator out of Wisconsin, and he is very against the House bill, the big beautiful bill. And he's saying we're spending like he's like President Trump and all the Republicans across the country they're running on cutting spending. Why are we spending more and more money? So
Yeah.
if this bill, the carbon copy went to the Senate made the same one, he's going to say no to it. So that's
Yeah.
going to peel off that another Republican in there brings us back to JD Vance, Vice President Vance, potentially being a tiebreaker because a lot of these people are tired of this useless spending. Again, not
Yeah.
saying that with education, there's a lot more in this bill than education, but there's a lot of money being spent and nobody's being very fiscally conservative. The Democrats spend a ton of money, Republicans also spend a ton of money. It's a two-party thing. America has a spending problem, and until we get that underway, I don't see what it is. And I know Senator Elizabeth Warren, she wrote a really good book, I think in like 2007, about modern monetary policy, where she thinks the United States' government is just too big to fail. And she made a lot of really good arguments in there. And I kind of agree with a lot of it. However, the Roman Empire failed. A lot of the big empires fail, and we're
Yeah.
not that old. We've been a
No.
country since 1576. Um, Historically speaking, we're a very new country.
Yeah.
We can fail. We can. I don't want to see it. I love our country. I think we're the best country in the world. But we have our issues, and we have a serious spending problem. I think Americans just, even personally, we love stuff, and
We
that's
do.
kind of it. I
We
love stuff. You love stuff.
I
It
do
is. It
love
is
stuff.
in our DNA. I feel like it is in our DNA. We love stuff. Exactly. We don't need this stuff. We really
Just
don't.
stuff all
Um,
around me. Yeah, I mean,
yeah. If you go to
I'm with you. I mean, I think that it's such a tough thing because again, anytime you say we have too much spending, it's oh well, we should cut that. Like, yeah, and it's like,
But we
well,
want the stuff.
yeah, it's like if you literally put McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, Wendy's, Panera all in front of me, said like you can't eat all this, you're eating too much. Pick one. I'm like, I want it all. I don't care. Like I will buy bigger pants. This looks delicious. And I think that's Americans kind of in the way we do stuff is we legit like, we're like, hey, we spend too much. We're like, yeah, what should we cut? We're like, I mean, I don't want to we have a lot of woods. Should we have less woods? Like, no, we need trees. Like, okay, no, no cutting woods. Like everybody, there's always a group, and that's pluralism. That's good. Like, we want that helps make our society diverse. But we also do have to like at some point you have to talk about it, and at some point you may have to do some things. Again, I always go to it's guns or butter. We can say guns or books. Sometimes I'm like, why are we spending so much on defense and like cutting education? It's more of a political talk. But it does make it weird, but there's, educational warfare here. Blake mentioned, we've been talking about vouchers and stuff. He mentioned AI, there were AI people. There are two episodes. There's an episode on AI and an episode on vouchers. If you go to our page, Educational Warfare, there's a card right there. You can click and go there, like and subscribe, please. And you can see those, see what we're talking about. AI is great, but we do like stuff. It's just like with that, everybody, there's once we get something we like, we latch onto it and put it in everything. There's, you can get AI to make your dinner reservation. Like there's apps for that, like uses AI. It kind of goes through everything. We do that a lot, and then we're like, oh, how did this go wrong? It's like, well, maybe we should have not made everything do the same thing or do this one thing or spend too much. So, and we have a lot, and that kind of goes into, the pushback or what should we do? My recommendation to teachers, and you can kind of tell yours is, hey, stay like what we're trying to do here today is keep you informed, right? Like if you didn't know how the money got to education, now you do in the form of grants. Thank you, Mr. Bellamy. We've talked about some of the cuts and some of the things it could do. If there's something that you're very passionate about that's being cut, call a state rep, call your congressman, federal congressman, call your senator, there are ways, just stay informed. There doesn't have to be protest yet about this because a lot of it is, as we've said, wait and see. But the worst thing that happened is it just hits you in the face that you had no idea something was coming. Stay informed on it. We'll try to inform you as much as possible. When there's new information on it, it's what we kind of been doing. We talked about Linda McMahon early on. We talked about the Department of Education being like said it's going to be shuttered, but now it's kind of like hanging around. Now we're talking about this budget that's in the big beautiful bill. And could it, it may not even pass, and then we might get a new version of it that gets recycled through after they look at it. We don't know, but we'll try to be here for you. So, and I think pushing back, I think again, and do what you do. You know, teachers are important for, curriculum, just telling stories, democratic engagement, have these conversations. Um, and by doing that, we'll also show our worth,
Mhm.
and I think that's an important step too. What are your thoughts on just, kind of people are, if they're freaking out, what would you suggest? Uh,
That's one thing, emailing and calling your congressman. That's one thing, I teach AP government, and I remember telling them, I told them a story about when I was in high school. There was, she had no business being talking about this. But she was a physics teacher, and she had Nancy Pelosi. She was Speaker of the House at that time under the Obama administration, and she had Nancy Pelosi's office phone number on her board. Not government teacher, not social studies, or anything like that. She goes, if you have any problems with education, call that number, leave a voicemail. And I'd always tell that story just because it stuck. It was so funny to me. But I always tell like my students, especially when we cover the First Amendment, the right to petition, you can look up all of your elected leaders and
yep.
you can find their email. They may not always respond, but the where I live, like our district is kind of split. So some people have Congressman Mark Green, some have Congressman Andy Ogles, and apparently both of them respond to emails and letters and stuff like that. I've known people that worked in both those offices, and they've attested to that they actually do read and respond. If there's something you don't like, email them, write them. Their job, especially if you're in the House, you're basically always running for reelection. You
Yep.
need to appease your constituents because at the end of the day, they want their job.
Hmm.
So you have to make your voter base happy. And that's one of the reasons I really liked. He's retired now, Senator Joe Manchin. Because he was a I'm sorry, senator in a deep red uh, West Virginia,
Yeah.
and he kept getting reelected because he would listen to his constituents and then work deals with them. You can point to so many different congressmen, whether in the House or the Senate, that actually do listen, and I do think they have good hearts to them, whether they're not in your political aisle or not. But you have to respect them as public servants because, like teachers, congressmen are also public servants. They are here to help us. How are they going to know what's wrong if we don't petition them, talk to them? I'm not
Yeah.
saying go protest like burn down a Starbucks, but like you need to talk to these people. Yeah, don't do that. But like,
Educational warfare does not condone nor recommend that.
yeah, no rioting. But no, write them, talk to them. A lot of them go to town halls. I know one of our senators doesn't do that. She's potentially running for governor, which, whew.
I
But
I don't, I'm like looking around like, Trevor, could you advise her? Jim, somebody say something. Like, I don't know.
I don't know. But that's neither here nor there. But
Yeah, that's just
but
another headache that we'll talk
she
about
doesn't
later.
respond to emails. But look up Tennessee. There's only one she.
Yeah.
So look into that. Always email them, call them because your voice matters. Maybe not one person, but small numbers add to big numbers. I mean, looking our next door neighbor in Kentucky, deep red state. They have a Democratic governor, Andy
Yep.
Beshear, who's talking about running for president in 2028 because, again, his predecessor really was terrible when it comes to education, and the teachers voted him out.
Yep.
So they have a Democratic governor in a deep, deep, deep red Kentucky who voted, I think,
Who
20 points for Trump recently.
who's been reelected too?
Yeah, Andy Beshear was reelected because
Yeah, he's not just a one term, like they got mad and there was a blue wave. That like he has kind of gone through the gauntlet and come out the other end of like you could be he's a multi-term blue governor in a very red state.
yeah, I
Like
know
the state
anecdotally,
Mitch McConnell's from. Let's just put that in
exactly,
perspective. Yeah.
absolutely, I know, and they had a decent challenger against him. He was the Attorney General of Kentucky, and he lost.
Yep.
and they put a lot of money in that campaign. So it just goes to show, I mean, when it comes to education, it's a very bipartisan thing. So whoever's on the right side of things, at least has a long-term vision, whoever shows empathy toward our teachers, but more importantly, our students, because at the end of the day, we serve our students.
Yep.
We serve our community. That is our goal. I don't, if I don't even know how to explain that, but like my main goal is to serve our students, make them better citizens, critical thinkers, and that's our job as teachers. I don't think that should be the main priority for everybody. Yeah, the summers off are great, but if you're only being a teacher for summers off, you should probably pick a different profession.
Right.
It's all
Because
about serving the students,
yeah,
having better, uh, getting them to have a better education. It's our chief goal.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I love all of that. Just being out there, just using your voice, and also use your voice with your neighbors. If a lot of people, like we've talked about, they're very okay with the cutting of spending in the United States, and that's kind of what they voted for. And they're just like lockstep. Like if they say cut and it has to do with money, I'm in for it. They may not know something maybe we just talked about, that their child may lose a service or lose something they love. And by saying, hey, like I know I just want to let you know, I looked into this, this could happen. That, now they might be like, whoa, whoa, and they look into it. You can spread this information and make sure that other people's voices are heard, that they don't just get, again, whacked with it just out of nowhere. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating thing. I think, super deep topic. What an episode. I mean, we could literally go into this all night,
Hours.
Oh yeah, we could sit back and forth, have random side tangents on different parts of politics and whatnot. But, with any big, laws changes, I'm tired just kind of processing it and trying to make sure to get everything. But I think, the force for good that educators, administrators, and parents can be when we unite for something is super powerful, super precious, for our most precious resource, which is our students. And that's just one thing that I like, just like you. I want to make sure it's taken care of, the right thing's done for them. And I think it's great that we um, are able to talk about this. Like, we're able to go into it. So I hope it was helpful to everybody out there. And I think it's an important topic to talk about.
Absolutely.
So, Blake, thank you for joining. Thank you for being there. Thank you for informing us. I think it was really awesome. Had some good laughs too. And just so for all of you, thank you for joining us in educational warfare. Um, it's been something that we want to really do to inform you, and you guys being here, you guys sharing it. So please, being part of it. So also anything you heard, if you have a comment about it, please feel free to email the show, educationalwarfare.pod@gmail.com. Send that in. Let us know your thoughts. We want to kind of, this is how you hone the message, is that we hear from you, we get different perspectives, what's going on in your area. Is there something we could put out there that people may need to know about? Something you want us to know. So, educationalwarfare.pod@gmail.com. Follow us on the socials, follow the channel. And, again, Blake, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited for the book. Come out in less than 2 weeks. Spoiler, I've read the first couple chapters. It's incredible.
Thank you so much, man. Yeah, Blake has been a huge part of, he's kind of helped me just with thoughts and helped me with looking at some stuff, helped me with some, language in it. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you saying that. And hopefully, it comes out June 10th. So, I'd love for us to maybe do something where we kind of talk a little bit about it, because obviously it's about teenagers and education. And we are in right now, for those who don't know. You right now, if you're a parent, you are sitting in your house knowing your teenager is going nowhere tomorrow. So it could help you in some of those, being forced around each other that summer kind of does. If you're home, or your kids are home together, and you don't want that phone call at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that sadly my mother got all the time. Love you, mom. So sorry. Like, me and my sister were fighting, and I call her on like one line, and I'm like, my sister's awful. Why is she here? And then my sister calls the other line, like, he's the devil. And she's trying to, make a living. It could help you with that. So maybe we'll talk about a few things and just kind of introduce it next week, if Blake would be so gracious to be back. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, so I
Listen to every
appreciate it.
podcast. So big listener too, big fan of the show.
Thank you,
Honored to
man.
be here.
Thank you, man. It was a lot of fun. So for us, for Mr. Blake Bellamy, I'm Dr. Jordan Lauer. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for emailing and following. And thank you for being a part of the fight.